subject in the curriculum begins with God. Now, my last video, I was discussing about how the scripture says all scripture is God breathed and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness, so that the servant of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. We were talking about Timothy, 2 Timothy 3. Now, when I ended that, I suggested to you that scripture is really the starting point in every subject of the curriculum. And somehow, I'm not sure how, even within Christian education, scripture has been relegated to a subject and not the beginning point of every subject. And as I've pondered this over a lifetime, I found this to be so true, I can't believe we've missed it. I mean, God is the source of all things. He's the creator God. He created the world. He created everything in it. That means he created the order of the world, mathematics. He created the things within the world, which is science, the trees, nature, animals, people, which gets into psychology, which gets into nutrition, which gets into biology. All these subjects in the curriculum have their source and origin in God. And somehow we've missed that. He gave us his word. He is the word. We think about writing in English language. He is the word. He expressed himself he has given us his word. He's expressed himself to us. And he expects us to go and bring this word to the nations. And so we see that there's communication within the Trinity, communication from God to man, and communication from man to man. And this is what it means to compose ideas and thoughts. And we learn in English, this is what we're learning in composition class, how to compose. And so all these things find their source and origin in God. Music finds its source in God. And we see the purpose of these subjects. We see the purpose of music in Scripture. Scripture tells us, that the instruments and the songs have their origin in heavenly places, that the angels sing and God sings and we sing. And so all of this is a revelatory of who he is. And so it is a wonderful, wonderful thing to be able to start every subject with God. And this is unfortunately something that many Christian parents deny their children by sending them to public school. They deny them the opportunity to understand and know who their God is in every subject of the curriculum. I took my middle school field study kids out to the field, and we just wonder at God. We prayed for animals one day, and God sent us like 300 geese. And my kids, my students, ran out after the geese, and they watched the geese. And they observed the geese. And then the geese flew, and God sent them to go right over our heads. Like it was we were at a airplane exhibition or something. They just flew right over our heads in order. It was incredible. The kids drew the geese. And we talked about the geese, and it was amazing to think about how God has made these creatures and how they behave and what we see in them, and just wonder at our God. And so every study, every chapter of a biology book, if we're studying, every subject finds its source and origin in God. When we look at history, we see God's hand in the world. That's really important to know what God has done before in our world. And we can know that by reading scripture. We can know that by studying the lives of the saints throughout time. We can study the church throughout history and study the context of the church within nations. What was God doing in different nations, and how did he bring those nations? How did he create those nations? How were those nations created? And the good and the bad of what happened throughout history. And literature is the handmaid of history. So literature actually illustrates history to us. It makes it personal, especially for some students. They may not like history at all, but when they read a story about someone's life, now it's coming alive to them. And so literature helps us to understand history, and so we can understand God's hand and what he's been doing in the lives of people down throughout history. And some parents think that that's not actually important for their kids to know. They think that it's not really that important, especially in high school. I'm going to send my kids to public school in high school because, so it's not actually important to study Catherine of Siena, to study Augustine, to study C.S. Lewis, to study George MacDonald. It's not actually important to study Martin Luther or Calvin. It's not actually important to study Athanasius or any of these church fathers. There's actually no time for that because our mind is on secular studies. But for the Christian child to understand what God has done in the lives of men and women throughout the last 2,000 years, to hear their story, their sacrifice, and their love, to hear their ideas, to see how they lived out their life in their time, for us, this is extremely important and not an opportunity to be missed.